They say legends are born from truth,
We must act
twisted
now
by time until
to
reality
secure
becomes myth.
our future.
But what happens when a myth walks into your life, breathing, bleeding, and absolutely refusing to die? Captain Sarah Chun never believed in fairy tales. She believed in plasma rifles, tactical superiority, and the cold mathematics of survival. She believed that humans were just another species stumbling through the galaxy, trying not to get extinct. She was wrong. When the Zephyrian Armada's most feared queen knelt before a battered human soldier and whispered words that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, Sarah learned that some legends don't just come true, they come home. This is the story of how humanity's greatest secret was revealed not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the trembling voice of an alien ruler who recognized something impossible. The return of the Void Walkers, the mythical beings who once held the galaxy's darkness at bay. And Sarah Chun? She was about to discover she wasn't just human. She was something far more dangerous and far more necessary than anyone could have imagined. Captain Sarah Chun had seen death in 1,000 different colors across the galaxy, but nothing quite prepared her for the sight of crystalline blood pooling beneath alien royalty. The Zephyrian Queen lay crumpled against the twisted metal of her own command throne, her 4 arms clutched against wounds that sparkled like broken diamonds in the emergency lighting. "Ma'am, we need to move." Sergeant Martinez's voice crackled through Sarah's comm unit as another explosion rocked the massive dreadnought. The reactor cores going critical in 8 minutes. Sarah ignored him, her eyes fixed on the dying queen. The evacuation of the Zephyrian flagship had been a straightforward mission. Rescue survivors, gather intelligence, get out before the ship became a miniature star. But this was different. This was the Crimson Queen, the terror of the Outer Rim, the alien monarch who had personally overseen the destruction of 17 human colonies. The Queen's compound eyes flickered open, focusing on Sarah with an intensity that made the human captain's skin crawl. Most Zephyrians stood 9 feet tall, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming like polished armor, but this one seemed smaller now, more fragile. The purple ichor seeping from her wounds caught the light strangely, creating patterns that almost looked like written language. "You came," the Queen whispered in perfect galactic standard, her voice like wind chimes made of broken glass. "After everything we did to your kind, you still came." Sarah's finger hovered over her sidearm's trigger. Military protocol was clear. Enemy combatants were to be detained or eliminated, depending on threat assessment. The Crimson Queen definitely qualified as a threat. But something in those alien eyes stopped her. Not fear or pain, but recognition. Like the Queen was seeing a ghost. "We're evacuating all survivors," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Can you move?" The Queen's mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of bitter laughter. "Move? Child, I am dying." The Dark Ones made sure of that. She gestured weakly toward the gaping holes in the ship's hull, where space showed through like hungry black mouths. They came from nowhere. Ships that bent light itself, weapons that ate matter. "We fought as hard as we could, but the Dark Ones..." Sarah frowned. Intelligence reports mentioned no faction by that name. The Galactic Union tracked every known spacefaring species, every militant group, every pirate collective. "Who are you talking about?" Another explosion, closer this time. The deck plating buckled, and Sarah had to grab a support beam to keep from falling. When she looked back, the Queen was staring at her with an expression that sent ice through Sarah's veins. "By the ancient void," the Queen breathed. "It cannot be. You're just human. But the way you move, the way you stand against the darkness without fear." Her voice grew stronger, more urgent. "Show me your weapon." Sarah hesitated. "Why? Please." The word came out broken, desperate. "If I am right, if the prophecies were true, then perhaps there is hope after all." Against her better judgment, Sarah drew her plasma rifle, a standard-issue weapon that had seen her through 3 years of border conflicts. The Queen's eyes went wide, her entire body trembling. "The energy signature," she whispered. "It resonates with the same frequency as the Void Walker's power. But that's impossible. They vanished 10,000 years ago. The legends say they sacrificed themselves to drive back the Dark Ones, sealing them beyond the edge of reality itself." Sarah felt like she was missing half a conversation. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, but we need to leave now. Can I carry you, or no? The queen's voice cut through the air like a blade. She struggled to push herself upright, her forearms shaking with the effort. If you're what I think you are, then carrying me would be inappropriate. But I must know for certain. With surprising speed, the queen reached out and grasped Sarah's free hand. The moment their skin made contact, the world exploded into light. Sarah found herself standing in what looked like the bridge of an ancient starship, but not like any design she'd ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, and control panels hummed with energy that felt alive. Around her, figures moved with fluid grace, tall, elegant beings that looked almost human except for their eyes, which held depths like looking into the heart of a neutron star. "The Void Walkers," a voice said behind her. Sarah spun around to find the queen standing there, but not the broken, dying creature from the ship. This version was regal, powerful, her crystalline armor gleaming with inner light. My ancestors called them the Guardians Between. They stood watch at the boundaries of known space, keeping the Dark Ones contained in the void beyond reality. The vision shifted, showing vast fleets of impossible ships locked in battle against things that hurt to look at directly. The enemy vessels seemed to be made of negative space itself, their weapons reaching out to unmake anything they touched. But the Void Walkers fought back with pure determination, their own ships glowing like stars as they pushed the darkness back. "They won," Sarah said, watching as the Dark Fleet retreated into tears in space itself. "They did more than win," the Queen replied. "They followed the Dark Ones into the void, sealing the passages behind them. The galaxy was safe, but the Guardians were gone forever. Or so we thought." The vision faded, and Sarah was back on the dying dreadnought, the Queen's hand still gripping hers. But something had changed. Sarah could feel energy coursing through her veins, see patterns in the emergency lighting that hadn't been there before. The Queen was staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "You carry their bloodline," the Queen whispered. Somehow, impossibly, the Void Walker survived. They hid among the younger races, waiting. But why now? Why are you manifesting when the seals have held for 10 millennia? Before Sarah could answer, a new alarm began blaring. On the tactical display, dozens of dark shapes were emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. Ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Because the seals are breaking, Sarah realized, the knowledge flowing through her like ice water. The Dark Ones are coming back. The Queen's grip tightened. Then, the prophecy is fulfilled. In the galaxy's darkest hour, the Guardians shall return. But you're just one person, child. How can you stand against an entire fleet? Sarah looked at her plasma rifle, seeing it now with new eyes. The weapon's energy core was resonating with something deep inside her, growing brighter with each passing second. Around them, the dying ship's lights began to pulse in rhythm with the rifle's hum. "I don't think I'm alone," she said, as her comm unit suddenly burst to life with reports from across the ship. Human soldiers were reporting impossible things. Weapons that fired with 10 times their normal power, personal shields that shrugged off hits that should have been fatal, and almost supernatural awareness of enemy positions. The Queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been relief. "The awakening has begun. Your presence is calling to others of the bloodline. But be warned, young Guardian, the Dark Ones remember the Void Walkers well. They will stop at nothing to destroy you before you can rally your people." Another explosion rocked the ship, but this one felt different. When Sarah looked at the tactical display, she saw that one of the dark ships had been destroyed, caught in a beam of pure white energy that had erupted from the human evacuation cruiser's weapons array. "Sergeant Martinez, to all units," her radio crackled. "I don't know what's happening, but our weapons just got a major upgrade. Energy output is off the charts." Sarah looked down at the Queen, who was smiling now despite her wounds. "What happens next?" "Next, you learn what you truly are," the Queen replied, "and pray that you are strong enough for what's coming. The Dark Ones are not just conquerors, child. They are the antithesis of existence itself. They don't want to rule the galaxy. They want to unmake it." The ship lurched as the reactor finally began its death sequence. Sarah made a split-second decision and scooped the Queen into her arms, surprised by how light the alien ruler felt. As they ran toward the evacuation bay, the Queen continued to speak in urgent tones. There will be others, she said. Humans who carry the bloodline, scattered across the galaxy. You must find them, unite them, train them. The ancient weapons will recognize their touch. The old ships will answer their call. But time is short. The prophecies speak of only 7 cycles before the void itself begins to unravel. They reached the evacuation bay just as the last transport was preparing to depart. As Sarah carried the Queen aboard, she caught sight of her reflection in a viewport. Her eyes, normally brown, now held flecks of silver that moved like living starlight. The transport pulled away from the dying dreadnought just as the reactor core finally gave up. But instead of the expected explosion, the ship simply faded as if it had never existed at all. In its place, one of the dark ships hung in space, its surface rippling like liquid shadow. They're learning, the Queen murmured. Testing our defenses, studying your people. This was not random attack, it was reconnaissance. They wanted to see if the Guardians had truly returned. Sarah stared out at the dark ship as it folded space around itself and vanished. In the distance, the human fleet was regrouping, their weapons still glowing with impossible energy. She could feel something calling to her from the depths of space. Other awakened bloodlines scattered across dozens of star systems. The Queen squeezed her hand weakly. The real war is about to begin, young Guardian. And this time, the fate of not just our galaxy, but all reality itself, hangs in the balance. As their transport jumped to hyperspace, Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with senses she was only beginning to understand. Somewhere out there, others were awakening to their true nature. The descendants of humanity's greatest secret were coming home. But in the void between dimensions, ancient intelligences were stirring as well. The Dark Ones had waited 10,000 years for this moment, and they would not be caught unprepared again. The legend was no longer sleeping. The question was whether it would be salvation or just another beautiful dream about to be devoured by the infinite darkness. 3 days after the encounter with the Crimson Queen, Sarah stood in the briefing room aboard the UES Defiance, staring at a holographic display that made no sense whatsoever. Admiral Harrison paced behind her, his weathered face creased with worry lines that seemed to have doubled overnight. "Explain it to me again, Captain," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd spent 40 years keeping humanity alive in a hostile galaxy. "Because what you're telling me sounds like something out of a children's fairy tale." Sarah kept her eyes on the display, where energy readings from across the fleet painted an impossible picture. "Sir, 17 different ship classes are showing weapons efficiency increases between 300 and 800%. Personal shield generators that were barely functional yesterday are now deflecting plasma cannon hits. And the sensor arrays." She gestured at a cascade of data streams. "We're detecting subspace distortions that shouldn't be visible to our equipment." "That's not what I meant, Captain." Sarah finally turned to face him. Admiral Harrison was old school, a man who believed in steel, fire, and the mathematics of warfare. The idea that his most trusted officer was claiming to be descended from mythical alien guardians was not sitting well with him. "Sir, I know how it sounds. But the evidence says our weapons got an upgrade," Harrison interrupted. "Could be captured alien tech, could be some kind of sympathetic resonance effect from being near Zephyrian equipment. What it doesn't say is that my people are turning into space wizards." Before Sarah could respond, her comm unit chirped with an emergency signal. "Captain Chun to the medical bay immediately. We have a situation." The medical bay was in chaos when they arrived. Dr. Reeves, the ship's chief medical officer, was frantically running scans on 3 unconscious crew members while nurses tried to keep a 4th patient sedated. The air hummed with strange energy, and several pieces of medical equipment were displaying readings that made no sense. "What happened?" Sarah asked, moving to the nearest bio bed where Chief Petty Officer Williams lay unconscious, his body surrounded by a faint shimmer of silver light. "It started about an hour ago," Dr. Reeves explained, not looking up from her scanner. "Williams was in engineering when he suddenly collapsed. Then Chun from navigation, Martinez from security, and Okafor from communications all went down within minutes of each other. But here's the strange part. According to my scans, they're not unconscious. Their brain activity is off the charts, like they're experiencing some kind of hyper-vivid dream state." Sarah approached William's bed and immediately felt something resonate in her chest, the same energy she'd experienced when touching the Zephyrian Queen. She was standing on the deck of a ship unlike anything in the current human fleet. The bridge stretched out before her in elegant curves, its surfaces made of what looked like crystallized light. Through the viewports, she could see a fleet of similar vessels moving in perfect formation, their hulls glowing with inner fire. "The old fleet remembers," a voice said beside her. Sarah turned to find Williams standing there, but not the grizzled engineer she knew. This version looked younger, taller, with eyes that held depths like black holes. "The ships are calling to us, Captain. They've been waiting in the deep void, sleeping until their crews returned." "What ships?" Sarah asked, but even as she spoke, she could feel the knowledge flowing through her. Ancient vessels, built by the Void Walkers before their final battle, hidden in pocket dimensions where time moved differently. Ships that were more than metal and energy, they were living extensions of their crew's will. "The Eternal Guard," Williams continued. 57 ships of the line, each one capable of bending reality to its crew's needs. "They've been waiting for 10,000 years for us to remember who we are." The vision shifted, showing her the void between galaxies. In that empty darkness, massive shapes moved with predatory grace, the Dark Ones preparing for their return. But there was something else there too, structures that hurt to look at directly, machines that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could process. "They're building something," Sarah realized. "The Dark Ones aren't just coming back. They're preparing to rewrite the fundamental laws of reality." Williams nodded grimly. "The unmaking engine. Once it's complete, they won't need to conquer the galaxy piece by piece. They'll simply edit it out of existence, replacing it with void. But the engine requires a specific energy signature to function, the same signature generated by sentient life." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "They need us alive to power their weapon." "Alive and afraid," Williams confirmed. "Terror, despair, the psychic emanations of civilizations watching their reality dissolve. It all feeds into the engine. The more we suffer, the stronger it becomes." Before Sarah could process this further, she was yanked back to the medical bay. Williams was sitting up on the bio bed, his eyes now carrying those same impossible depths she'd seen in the vision. Around the room, the other unconscious crew members were also awakening. "Captain," Williams said in a voice that carried harmonics no human throat should produce, "we need to talk." Admiral Harrison was backing toward the door, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "What the hell is happening to my crew?" "They're remembering, sir," Sarah replied, though she wasn't entirely sure what that meant. "The bloodline is awakening throughout the fleet. We're not just human anymore. We never were completely human." The Admiral's face went pale. "Are you telling me my ship has been infiltrated by aliens?" "No, sir," Williams said, standing with fluid grace. "We're telling you that humans are the children of the Void Walkers. They didn't just disappear into the void 10,000 years ago. They found something there. Primitive species on the edge of evolution, scattered across a dozen worlds. They gave them the spark of higher consciousness, the gift of their own essence, and then guided them from the shadows until they were ready to stand on their own." Martinez, now awake and radiating the same strange energy as the others, added, "We're not becoming aliens, Admiral. We're becoming what humanity was always meant to be." Dr. Reeves looked up from her scanners, her face a mask of scientific fascination and terror. "The genetic scans are incredible. Their DNA is rewriting itself in real time, but not randomly. It's following a template that was already there, hidden in what we thought was junk genetic material." Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. The Void Walkers didn't just sacrifice themselves to stop the Dark Ones. They seeded the galaxy with their own essence, creating backup guardians who would awaken when the threat returned. "But why humans specifically?" Admiral Harrison asked, though he seemed to be accepting the impossible with the flexibility of a career military officer. "Because we were the most adaptable," Sean for Navigation said as she sat up on her bio bed. "The Void Walkers needed guardians who could think creatively, adapt quickly, and work together despite differences. Most alien species are too rigid, too bound by instinct. But humans," she smiled, and for a moment her entire face seemed to glow with inner light. Humans are chaos given form. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Sarah's comm unit chirped again, this time with reports from across the fleet. Similar awakenings were happening on every ship. Roughly 20% of personnel were manifesting the same abilities, while the rest remained normal humans. Sir, Sarah said to the Admiral, we need to contact Fleet Command. If this is happening here, it's probably happening throughout human space. We need to coordinate, belay that, Admiral Harrison said sharply. Until we understand what's happening, this information doesn't leave the ship. For all we know, this could be some kind of alien mind control. Admiral, she said carefully, with all due respect, we don't have time for standard protocols. The Dark Ones aren't going to wait for us to file reports and schedule committee meetings. According to the visions, we have less than 7 cycles, about 3 years, before their unmaking engine comes online. Visions. Harrison's voice carried dangerous skepticism. Before anyone could respond, every alarm on the ship began blaring simultaneously. The intercom crackled to life with the voice of the bridge officer. Admiral to the bridge immediately. We have multiple unidentified contacts emerging from hyperspace. They rushed to the bridge to find chaos. The main display showed dozens of ships dropping out of hyperspace around the fleet, but these weren't Dark One vessels. They were elegant, flowing designs that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, their hulls pulsing with gentle bioluminescence. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect galactic standard, but the source is claiming to be from the Eternal Sanctuary. Admiral Harrison frowned. I've never heard of any faction called the Eternal Sanctuary. Because we're not a faction, came a voice from the comm system, melodious and ancient. We are the survivors. The Void Walkers who chose to remain behind when our brothers and sisters entered the Void. We have watched over the galaxy from the shadows, waiting for this day. On the main screen, one of the elegant ships moved closer, and Sarah could see figures moving behind transparent sections of the hull. They looked almost human, but taller, more ethereal, with eyes that held starlight. I am High Guardian Lysander, the voice continued. We come to offer guidance to our newly awakened children. The time of hiding is over. The Dark Ones have begun their final assault on reality itself. If we're to have any hope of stopping them, human and Voidwalker must unite as they were always meant to. Sarah felt a surge of recognition, the same sensation she'd experienced when touching the Zephyrian Queen. These beings were family, in a way that transcended species or biology. Admiral, she said quietly, I think we need to hear what they have to say. Harrison looked around at his transformed crew, at the impossible ships on his display, at the readings that defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. Finally, he nodded. Open a channel, he ordered. Let's see what our ancestors want to tell us. As the connection was established, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in a dark console. Her eyes now held the same starlight depths as the awakened crew, and she could feel power flowing through her veins like liquid fire. Whatever came next, she knew there was no going back to the simple certainty of being merely human. The galaxy was about to discover that its most chaotic species had been hiding the blood of its greatest guardians. And, in the void between realities, the Dark Ones felt the first stirring of an emotion they hadn't experienced in 10 millennia. Uncertainty. The Eternal Sanctuary ship that docked with the UES Defiance was unlike anything in Sarah's experience. The corridors seemed to pulse with life, their walls shifting between transparency and opacity as if breathing. High Guardian Lysander stood 7 feet tall, his features sharp and elegant, with skin that seemed to contain traces of nebular dust and eyes that held the depth of space itself. You feel the awakening strongly, he observed as he studied Sarah in the main conference room. Your bloodline carries deep memory, perhaps one of the original 12 who seeded humanity. Admiral Harrison sat stiffly at the head of the table, flanked by his awakened crew members. The Crimson Queen, now recovering in the ship's guest quarters, had insisted on attending despite her injuries. Her crystalline armor had been repaired by sanctuary medical technology that seemed more like art than science. High Guardian, Harrison began formally. My people need answers. Are my crew still human? Are they still under my command? And what exactly are we facing? Lysander's expression grew somber. Admiral, Your crew are more human than they have ever been. The awakening doesn't replace their humanity. It completes it. As for command, he glanced around the table at the silver-eyed crew members. The Void Walker bloodline acknowledges no authority except the mission to protect reality itself. But, fortunately, that mission aligns with humanity's survival. Chief Williams leaned forward. High Guardian, in the visions we saw ships, the Eternal Guard. Are they real? Very real, Lysander confirmed. 57 vessels built in the final years before the Great Sealing. They exist in a pocket dimension called the Deep Harbor, where time flows differently. The crews that will bond with those ships are awakening now, across human space. Sarah felt a stirring in her chest. I can sense them. Other awakened, scattered across the galaxy. But there's something else. Concentrations of the bloodline in specific locations. Lysander nodded approvingly. The Inheritance Worlds. 7 planets where the original Void Walkers established sanctuaries before the Great Sealing. Each world contains a fragment of the Master Template, the complete memory of our people's knowledge and abilities. The Crimson Queen spoke for the first time, her voice still weak but determined. High Guardian, my people have legends of the Inheritance Worlds. We call them the Forbidden Spheres, places where reality became flexible. Our ancestors tried to colonize one 3,000 years ago. What happened? Dr. Reeves asked. The Queen's mandibles clicked nervously. The entire colony fleet vanished. When our search vessels arrived, they found the planet unchanged, but every trace of Zephyrian presence had been erased. The world had rejected them. The worlds are attuned to Void Walker genetic markers, Lysander explained. They're designed to awaken only for those carrying the bloodline. But reaching them won't be simple. The Dark Ones know of their existence and have been placing guard fleets in the surrounding systems. Admiral Harrison pulled up a strategic display. Show me where these worlds are located. Lysander gestured, and the hologram shifted, revealing 7 points scattered across the galactic spiral. Sarah felt her breath catch as she recognized the pattern. It formed a perfect geometric configuration that seemed to pulse with meaning. The Eternal Seal, she whispered, the knowledge flowing through her awakened memory. The 7 worlds are anchor points for the barriers holding the Dark Ones in the void. If they're destroyed, the seals fail completely, Lysander confirmed. The Dark Ones would be able to enter our reality not just with ships, but with their true forms, entities of pure negation that exist beyond the laws of physics. Martinez studied the display. How long do we have before they reach the first world? Our scouts estimate 47 days before their advanced fleets arrive at Kepler 442b, the closest inheritance world to Dark One space. But there's another complication. Lysander's expression grew darker. The awakening process is accelerating beyond our projections. Instead of gradually manifesting over several years, the bloodline is activating rapidly across human space. This massive energy release is acting like a beacon, drawing them here faster, Sarah realized. Precisely. Every newly awakened human is a lighthouse in the void, calling out to the Dark Ones. They're abandoning their original timetable and committing everything to a direct assault. Dr. Reeves pulled up her medical scans. High Guardian, is there any way to slow the awakening process? Control it somehow? Even if there were, we wouldn't take it, Williams interjected. The visions are clear. We need every awakened human we can get. The Dark Ones aren't just bringing ships this time. They're bringing devourers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lysander's face went pale, and even the Crimson Queen recoiled at the word. Impossible, lisandre breted. The Devourers were all destroyed in the final battle. We made sure of it. What are Devourers? Admiral Harrison demanded. It was the Crimson Queen who answered, her voice hollow with ancient fear. In the oldest legends of my people, Devourers were the Dark One's ultimate weapons. Living ships the size of moons, but not just ships, parasitic intelligences that could consume entire star systems and add their energy to their own mass. The legends say they could grow so large they threatened to collapse space-time itself. Lysander was shaking his head. We saw them destroyed. Our final assault before the Great Sealing specifically targeted the Devourer nurseries. But if they've somehow rebuilt them, they've had 10,000 years, Sarah pointed out grimly, and access to whatever energy sources exist in the void. They could have built a dozen devourers by now. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. Bridge to Admiral Harrison. Emergency contact from Kepler, 442b system. They rushed to the bridge to find chaos on the displays. Long-range sensors were showing massive distortions in space around the first inheritance world, and the emergency beacon was transmitting a message that chilled everyone present. "This is Colony Administrator Janet Torres," came a voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Kepler, 442b is under attack by unknown forces. They're not using conventional weapons. They're doing something to the planet itself. The continents they're folding in on themselves. Gravity is becoming unstable. We have maybe 6 hours before the planet becomes uninhabitable." "But that's impossible," Admiral Harrison muttered. "The Dark One advance fleet shouldn't reach that system for over a month." Lysander's face had gone ashen. "They didn't send an advance fleet. They sent a devourer. A mature one, from the sound of those reports." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "How long would it take us to reach that system? At maximum hyperspace velocity?" "For days," the navigation officer reported. "Too long," the Crimson Queen said from her mobility support frame. "By the time any rescue fleet arrives, the planet will be gone, and the devourer will be stronger. Admiral, you need to evacuate that world now." "With what?" Harrison demanded. "Even if I commandeered every transport in the sector, we couldn't evacuate 2 million colonists in 6 hours." Sarah looked at Lysander. "What about the Eternal Guard ships? You said they exist in a pocket dimension where time moves differently." "The Deep Harbor could theoretically mount an immediate response," Lysander admitted. "But those ships require crews with fully awakened bloodlines. Your people have only just begun the process." "Then we accelerate it," Williams said, his eyes blazing with inner light. "High Guardian, in the visions, we saw the old fleets in action. The ships weren't just vessels. They were extensions of their crew's will. If we can establish a connection." "Dangerous," Lysander warned. "Forcing the awakening process could burn out human neural pathways entirely. You could lose yourselves completely." Sarah looked around at her awakened crew members, seeing the same determination reflected in their silver-flecked eyes. "High Guardian, what's the alternative? Let 2 million people die while we wait for a gradual awakening." Admiral Harrison stepped forward. "I don't understand half of what you people are talking about, but I understand duty. If there's a chance to save those colonists, we take it." Lysander studied their faces for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But understand, what I'm proposing has never been attempted. We'll be opening a direct connection to the Deep Harbor and calling one of the Eternal Guard ships through dimensional barriers. The psychic stress alone could kill you. Better than living with the knowledge that we let millions die," Martinez said simply. The process took place in the ship's largest cargo bay, hastily converted into something between a medical facility and a mystical ritual space. Lysander and his fellow Void Walkers created patterns on the floor using a substance that looked like liquid starlight, while Sarah and her crew prepared themselves for what might be their last act as recognizably human beings. "The ship that will answer your call is the Determination," Lysander explained as he worked. "She's been waiting the longest, and her previous crew's memories should be compatible with your neural patterns. But remember, once you establish the connection, the ship becomes part of you. You'll share consciousness with an intelligence that's existed for 10,000 years." Sarah laid down in the center of the pattern, her awakened crew members positioned around her in a precise geometric arrangement. As Lysander began the summoning, she felt reality bend around them. The cargo bay faded away, replaced by the bridge of an impossible ship. But this wasn't like her visions. This was real, solid, immediate. She could feel the ship's systems responding to her thoughts, weapons charging, engines spinning up to velocities that should have been impossible. "Sarah," the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and patient. "I am the Determination. I have been waiting for you." Around her, she felt her crew members' consciousness merging with the ship's systems. Williams bonding with engineering, Martinez with tactical, Chun with navigation. They were still themselves, but more. They were a crew in the truest sense, their minds linked not just to each other, but to a vessel that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Hi, Guardian," Sarah's voice echoed strangely as she spoke through both her human mouth and the ship's communication systems. "We're ready." Through the dimensional barriers, she could feel the determination tearing a hole in reality itself. Space folded around them as the ancient ship emerged into normal space-time, its hull blazing with the light of contained stars. Admiral Harrison's voice came over the radio, filled with awe. "Captain Chun, is that you?" "It's us, Admiral," Sarah replied, her consciousness now distributed across an impossible fusion of human intuition and alien technology. "We're going to Kepler 442b. If there are any other awakened humans in the fleet, have them prepare for emergency acceleration. We're about to show the Dark Ones why the Void Walkers never truly died." As the determination folded space around itself and vanished into hyperspace, Sarah felt the first stirring of hope since this nightmare began. They were no longer just humans stumbling through a hostile galaxy. They were guardians, and they were going to war. The determination emerged from hyperspace into a nightmare. Kepler 442b hung before them like a dying jewel, its surface writhing in impossible ways as gravity itself was being rewritten. Continents folded upward into geometries that hurt to perceive, while the planet's twin moons were slowly spiraling inward, their orbital mechanics corrupted by the massive dark shape feeding on the world's reality. "By the ancient void," Sarah whispered, her consciousness distributed across both her human body and the ship's quantum crystalline matrix. "That's not a ship. That's a living planet." The Devourer was a nightmare of organic architecture and twisted space-time. Roughly the size of Earth's moon, but constantly shifting, its surface pulsed with veins of anti-light that seemed to absorb photons before they could escape. Massive tendrils of condensed darkness stretched from its bulk down to Kepler 442b's surface, where they were literally drinking the planet's structural integrity. "Captain!" William's voice echoed through the ship's neural network, his consciousness now merged with engineering systems that defied human understanding. "The Devourer isn't just consuming matter. It's unmaking the fundamental forces that hold the planet together. At current rate of consumption, we have maybe 3 hours before the world collapses into a singularity." Through the determination's enhanced sensors, Sarah could detect the frantic evacuation efforts taking place in orbit. Dozens of civilian transports were struggling to flee the system, but their engines were failing as the Devourer's influence spread through local space. The colony ships moved sluggishly, their crews apparently fighting just to maintain basic life support. "Martinez," Sarah called to her tactical officer, whose mind was now interfaced with weapon systems that operated on principles of applied mathematics rather than mere energy projection. "Can we get those transports to safety?" "Working on it," came the reply, Martinez's consciousness stretching across computational matrices that calculated trajectories through folded space. The Devourer's presence is corrupting hyperspace within a 12-light-hour radius. But I think I can create stable corridors if we channel our reality anchors properly. Sarah felt the ship responding to Martinez's will, exotic energy cascading through systems that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Beams of crystalline light reached out from the determination, creating tunnels of stable space-time that the fleeing transports could follow to safety. One by one, the civilian ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying hundreds of thousands of colonists away from the dying world. But Sarah knew they were only buying time. The Devourer would follow, growing stronger with each world it consumed, until nothing remained but endless void. "We need to attack that thing," she decided, her human intuition merging with tactical databases that contained 10,000 years of warfare against impossible enemies. "Sarah," the ship's consciousness whispered in her mind, ancient and patient. The previous crew that fought the Devourers learned hard lessons. These entities cannot be destroyed by conventional weapons, no matter how advanced. They exist partially outside our reality. Most attacks simply pass through them. Then, how did the original Void Walkers defeat them? By making an unthinkable sacrifice. They turned their own ships into reality bombs, devices that could forcibly edit the Devourers out of existence. But the process required the complete dissolution of the ship's crew into pure energy. Sarah felt her human crew members' consciousness recoil at the thought. They had just discovered their true nature, gained impossible power and purpose. The idea of immediately sacrificing themselves was, there has to be another way. Chen interrupted for navigation, her mind now capable of perceiving the universe in ways that made traditional physics seem quaint. The awakening is accelerating across human space. I can feel dozens of new guardians manifesting every hour. If we can buy them time to reach full power. The Devourer won't give us that time, Williams pointed out grimly. Look at the consumption rate. It'll finish with this planet in hours, then move on to the next system. By the time backup arrives, we'll be facing a Devourer that's twice as large and powerful. Through the ship's sensors, Sarah watched the planet's surface buckle again as another continent was folded into impossible angles and consumed. The screams of 2 million colonists echoed through subspace frequencies that the determination could detect, but mercifully filter out. That decided her. No, Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through both human vocal cords and quantum communication arrays. We're not sacrificing ourselves, and we're not running. There's a third option. She reached deep into the ship's memory banks, accessing records from the final battles of the Great Sealing. The original Void Walkers had indeed defeated the Devourers through sacrifice, but their tactics had been born of desperation, not optimal strategy. What if we don't try to destroy it? She mused aloud. What if we try to turn it? The ship's consciousness seemed to pause, processing implications across probability matrices that human minds couldn't fully grasp. Explain. The Devourers are parasitic intelligences, right? They consume reality to grow stronger. But what if they encountered something that was more real than baseline reality? Something that could overwrite their consumption patterns? Martinez caught on first. You're talking about using the reality anchors as an offensive weapon. Instead of stabilizing space around the transports, we anchor the Devourer itself to our version of reality. Exactly. We don't try to destroy it. We force it to become something else. Something that serves life instead of consuming it. Williams' excitement rippled through the ship's neural network. The conversion process would require massive energy inputs, but theoretically, yes, it could work. We'd be rewriting the Devourer's fundamental nature at the quantum level. The risks are enormous, the ship's consciousness warned. If the conversion fails, we'll have created something far worse than a Devourer. And the energy requirements would drain our reality anchors completely. We'd be defenseless if there are other Dark One forces in the area. Sarah looked at the dying planet, feeling the psychic screams of millions of people facing extinction. Through her enhanced awareness, she could sense the Dark One's larger plan beginning to unfold. Fleets of shadow ships moving through the void, targeting each of the inheritance worlds simultaneously. This Devourer was just the first wave. Do it, she decided. Begin the conversion sequence. The Determination's hull began to glow as exotic energies cascaded through systems that existed in multiple dimensions. Sarah felt her crew's consciousness expand, their minds interfacing directly with the fundamental forces of reality as they prepared to attempt something that had never been tried in the history of the galaxy. Conversion anchors at full power, Martinez reported, his awareness now spanning tactical systems that could target individual atoms across interplanetary distances. Reality field generators spinning up to maximum coherence. Navigation confirming spatial lock on target. Chen added, her consciousness stretched across dimensional matrices that mapped the Devourer's position in 17 different layers of space-time. Warning, the entity is becoming aware of our intentions. It's beginning evasive maneuvers. Through the ship's sensors, Sarah watched the Devourer's massive bulk begin to shift, its feeding tendrils withdrawing from the planet as it prepared to defend itself. But it was too late. The Determination's reality anchors had already established a quantum lock that transcended normal space. Beginning conversion in 3, 2, 1, the universe exploded into light. Sarah felt her consciousness scattered across probability fields as the Determination channeled the raw force of creation itself through its systems. The ship became a lens that focused the fundamental energy of existence into a beam that struck the Devourer like the birth of a new universe. For a moment that lasted both nanoseconds and eons, Sarah existed simultaneously as human, ship, and living equation that was rewriting the laws of physics. She felt the Devourer's alien consciousness fighting the conversion, its billion-year-old hunger struggling against the imposition of a new nature. But slowly, impossibly, the transformation began. The Devourer's surface shifted from anti-light to gentle luminescence as its reality consumption organs were rewritten into reality generation matrices. Its massive bulk, which had been growing larger with each planet consumed, began to shrink as it expelled the stolen matter and energy back into normal space. "It's working," Williams breathed, his awareness tracking energy patterns that showed the entity's fundamental nature shifting from parasitic to symbiotic. The conversion is holding. The Devourer is becoming something else. Sarah felt the alien intelligence that had once been the Devourer reaching out tentatively, its consciousness no longer driven by endless hunger, but by curiosity and, incredibly, gratitude. Through the quantum link, she sensed its new understanding. It had been a slave to its nature for millions of years, driven to consume without choice or hope of change. "I remember," the entity spoke, its voice carried through harmonics that made the ship's hull ring like a bell. "Before the hunger, before the darkness, I was alive. I was free." The transformed Devourer, now something unprecedented in galactic history, reached out with tendrils that had been organs of consumption and began repairing Kepler 442b. Continents unfolded back into stable configurations, gravity returned to normal patterns, and the planet's dying atmosphere began to regenerate. But the effort had drained the determination's reality anchors completely. Sarah felt the ship's systems shutting down one by one as they exhausted their exotic energy reserves. "Sarah," the ship's consciousness whispered weakly, "we've succeeded beyond all projections. But we're vulnerable now. The other Dark One fleets will have detected what happened here. They'll send everything they have to stop this from spreading." Through her fading, enhanced awareness, Sarah could sense them coming. Dozens of shadow ships emerging from the void, led by something vast and malevolent that radiated pure hatred for the light they had just created. "How long until our systems recharge?" she asked. 18 hours at minimum, possibly longer. Sarah looked at the transformed entity that had once been humanity's nightmare, now gently tending to the world it had nearly destroyed. An impossible idea began to form in her mind. "What if we're not fighting alone anymore?" she said quietly. "What if we've just made an ally that the Dark Ones never expected to face?" The transformed Devourer seemed to sense her thoughts. Its massive bulk turned toward the approaching Shadow Fleet, and for the first time in millions of years, it prepared to fight not to consume, but to protect. The real battle was about to begin. The Dark One fleet emerged from the void like a spreading infection across the stars. 47 ships of living shadow, their hulls writhing with geometries that violated the basic principles of reality. At their head came something that made Sarah's enhanced consciousness recoil in horror, a flagship that existed in negative space, a vessel that was less than nothing given malevolent form. "The Unmaker's crown," the transformed Devourer whispered, its massive bulk positioning itself between the approaching fleet and the still recovering Kepler 442b. "I remember that ship. It was there when the Dark Ones first corrupted me, turned me from guardian into weapon. The entity that commands it is older than this galaxy." Sarah felt the determination's systems struggling to recharge, exotic energies trickling back through reality anchors that had been drained to near destruction. Around her, her crew's consciousness remained merged with the ship's quantum matrix, but their human bodies were unconscious, overwhelmed by the strain of rewriting a Devourer's fundamental nature. "How long can you hold them?" she asked the entity that had once been humanity's greatest nightmare. "Alone? Perhaps minutes," came the reply, harmonics of regret rippling through the communication. "I'm still learning this new nature, still remembering what I was before the corruption. But I will not flee. These beings turned me into a monster for eons. I owe them nothing but resistance." Through the determination sensors, Sarah watched the Shadow Fleet spread into attack formation. The twisted ships moved without regard for physics, their forms shifting between dimensions as they prepared weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. But something else was happening. Across human space, Sarah could feel the awakening process accelerating exponentially. The conversion of a devourer had sent shockwaves through the quantum field that connected all Void Walker bloodlines, triggering a cascade of manifestations that spanned dozens of star systems. Captain Martinez's voice echoed weakly through the ship's neural network, his consciousness still interfaced with tactical systems despite his body's exhaustion. I'm detecting massive reality distortions throughout the local galactic arm. The Awakened are calling the Eternal Guard ships through dimensional barriers. Sarah felt her human heart skip a beat, even as her enhanced awareness processed the implications. How many? All of them, Chun whispered from navigation, her mind stretched across probability matrices that tracked impossible events. Every single ship in the deep harbor is responding. 57 vessels crossing dimensional barriers simultaneously. The space around Kepler 442b began to ripple as reality folded in on itself. One by one, ships of crystallized starlight emerged from hyperspace, their hulls blazing with the combined will of awakened humans who had chosen to sacrifice their purely human nature to become something greater. The UES Defiance appeared first, Admiral Harrison's voice crackling through quantum communication arrays. This is Admiral Harrison to all Guardian vessels. I don't understand half of what's happening, but I understand this. We don't abandon people, especially not our own. Ship after ship materialized, the indomitable will crewed by awakened Marines who had learned to bend space itself. The endless horizon, its navigation crew capable of plotting courses through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The righteous fury, armed with weapons that fired concentrated justice rather than mere energy. High Guardian Lysander's voice resonated across the quantum field. The Great Awakening is complete. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Eternal Guard stands ready. But remember, we face not just ships, but the fundamental force of entropy given consciousness. This battle will determine whether reality itself survives. The transformed Devourer's massive form seemed to glow brighter as it sensed the approaching Guardian fleet. I am not alone, it said with wonder that transcended species. For the first time since my corruption, I am not alone. The Dark One fleet had completed its deployment, forming a sphere of negative space around the system. The Unmaker's crown floated at their center, its impossible geometry causing visual distortions that made Sarah's human brain struggle to process what it was seeing. Guardians, a voice spoke across all frequencies, ancient beyond measure and filled with hate that predated the birth of stars. You returned to meddle with forces beyond your comprehension. Your ancestors fled into the void rather than face the truth. Existence is suffering, reality is pain. We offer the mercy of unmaking. Admiral Harrison's response carried the weight of human stubbornness refined over millions of years of evolution. Counteroffer, go to hell. The battle began. Shadow ships phased through dimensions, appearing behind Guardian vessels to fire weapons that erased sections of reality itself. But the Eternal Guard had learned from their ancestors' sacrifice. Instead of meeting entropy with entropy, they fought with creation itself. The determination sensors showed Sarah a war unlike anything in galactic history. Guardian ships moved like dancers, their hulls weaving between attacks that could unmake planets while returning fire with beams of pure possibility. Where shadow weapons erased matter, Guardian reality anchors wrote it back into existence. The transformed Devourer threw itself into combat with the fury of someone who had finally remembered what they were fighting for. Its massive bulk absorbed attacks that should have destroyed worlds, then retaliated by healing the wounds the Dark Ones had torn in space-time itself. Sarah, the ship's consciousness spoke urgently. Our reality anchors are at 30% and climbing but slowly. The other Guardian ships are doing better. Their crews completed the awakening gradually, while we forced ours through emergency acceleration. Sarah watched the battle rage around them, seeing Guardian ships taking terrible damage as they fought to protect not just human space, but the fundamental structure of reality. They were winning, but at a cost. Several ships had already been forced to sacrifice themselves, their crews choosing dissolution rather than retreat. There has to be another way, she muttered, her enhanced consciousness racing through tactical scenarios. We converted one devourer. What if we could convert their entire fleet? Impossible, Williams protested weakly from engineering. The devourer wanted to be converted. It had been fighting its nature for millions of years. The shadow ships are pure manifestations of entropy. They don't want to change. They want everything else to stop existing. The original Void Walkers didn't just seal the Dark Ones away. They planted seeds of pure creation in the void itself, designed to sprout if the seals ever failed. The ship's consciousness seemed to awaken from a deep sleep. Sarah, what you're suggesting, the reality seed was theoretical even to our creators. It would require the combined will of every awakened human, focused through a single point of contact with the quantum field. Me, Sarah realized. I'm the focal point, the first to awaken, the strongest connection to both human and Void Walker consciousness. Around her, she felt her crew's minds reaching out across the battle, connecting with the awakened humans throughout the Guardian fleet. Thousands of consciousnesses began to merge, not into a collective, but into a symphony of individual wills united in common purpose. The Crimson Queen's voice reached her through quantum harmonics. Sarah, my people's legends speak of such things. The Shapers of First Light, beings who could write new laws of physics through pure will. But the cost. I know the cost, Sarah replied, feeling the reality seed beginning to form around the determination. And I accept it. The seed manifested as a sphere of impossibly bright light that seemed to contain entire universes within its boundaries. It pulsed with the combined creative force of every awakened human, their refusal to surrender reality to entropy given tangible form. The Dark One fleet seemed to sense what was happening. The Unmaker's crown turned toward the determination, bringing weapons online that could erase entire star systems. But the transformed Devourer moved to intercept, its massive bulk shielding the Guardian ship as the reality seed reached critical resonance. Now, Sarah whispered, and released 10,000 years of stored creation into the void. The light that erupted from the reality seed didn't just illuminate the battlefield. It rewrote the fundamental laws governing local space-time. Shadow ships found themselves unable to phase between dimensions as the quantum field solidified around them. Weapons designed to unmake reality simply stopped functioning as the area around Kepler 442b became more real than baseline existence. The Dark One fleet, stripped of their ability to operate outside normal physics, found themselves facing the combined fury of 57 Guardian ships fighting on their home ground. The battle turned from desperate defense to overwhelming victory in moments. But the Unmaker's crown had one final gambit. As its escort ships were systematically destroyed or driven off, it began a process that Sarah recognized with horror. It was converting itself into a reality bomb, preparing to detonate its own existence to create a hole in space-time large enough to let the true Dark Ones through from the void. Not today, the transformed Devourer said simply, and threw itself directly into the flagship's path. The collision between creation and entropy lit up the system like the birth of a new star. When the light faded, both entities were gone, but in their place, something wonderful had been born. A new star hung in space where the battle had raged, its light carrying harmonics of peace that would echo across the galaxy for eons. Sarah felt her consciousness settling back into purely human parameters as the reality seed's energy dissipated. Around her, her crew was awakening in their physical bodies, still enhanced but no longer existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Did we win? Martinez asked groggily. Sarah looked out at the new star, at the Guardian fleet regrouping in triumph, at Kepler 442b spinning peacefully in an orbit that had been saved by the sacrifice of a reformed monster and an ancient enemy. Through the quantum field, she could sense other battles being won throughout human space as awakened crews reached the remaining inheritance worlds ahead of their attackers. We won this battle, she said finally. But the war isn't over. The Dark Ones will send other fleets, find new ways to attack reality itself. But now they know something that should terrify them. What's that? Williams asked. Sarah smiled, feeling the connection to thousands of awakened humans throughout the galaxy, Ordinary people who had discovered they carried the blood of legends and chosen to live up to that legacy. They know that when you threaten humanity's home, humanity doesn't just fight back. We become something that makes gods look small. The determination began its journey back to human space, carrying word of victory and the knowledge that the galaxy's most chaotic species had finally remembered why the universe needed chaos, to keep the darkness from winning. Behind them, the new star burned with the light of sacrifice transformed into hope, and across the galaxy, legends walked among the stars once more.